Laura here with Silk and COUPE, and today I have a very special guest. This is Rhys Pender. He is a master of wine. He's a local wine educator. He also owns a winery down in Coston called Little Farm, so he wears many hats, and I'm very honored that you...
Too many hats, probably.
Yeah. I'm super honored and flattered that you agreed to sit down with me today, so thank you so much.
Oh, no worries. It's fun.
So I guess the first question that I'd like to ask you is, why wine? Was it accidental, or how did you come about?
Yeah, wine kind of just grew into it, I guess. Like one of my very first jobs as a kid was when I was 14, was working in a retail store in Australia, like stacking shelves and, running the till, that kind of stuff. And then, so I probably learned a little bit by default then, not that I was interested, but then after university, went and traveled around Europe and got really interested in food. Then when I moved to Canada, I ended up doing a professional culinary training, and in that did a wine course, and then really just kind of found it so fascinating, all the different wines of the world, the places, the people, and just kind of from there just kept wanting to learn more and more, and then kind of didn't stop till I finished the Master of Wine. And so yeah, just kind of snowballed from an interest in food, and that I think food and wine just goes so importantly together, right? And
absolutely.
Yeah, so yeah, that's kind of
that's a big thing that I focus on my blog, is just food and wine pairings and how they all go together.
Yeah, I love it. It's so fun, and
yeah. So what inspired you or motivated you to go all the way to become a master of wine? Because that is an enormous undertaking, and not many people can even...
Yeah, probably foolishness, stupidity, I don't know, but like I did the WSET diploma, and I said to myself, oh, I want to do the Master of Wine by the time I'm 50. That was kind of when I finished the diploma. But then I just I took 1 year off, and then I'm like, you know what, I just want to keep going. So I just jumped straight back into it and kept going, which I'm glad now, because I'm not anywhere near 50 yet, but I would hate to be studying now like that. It was easier to keep that momentum going, and I think that's an important thing. If you are in wine education, don't to keep it going is much easier than to take a big break and then start again. So yeah. So
what regions are on your radar right now? Like, what's really kind of intriguing you and piquing your interest in the wine world?
I love all the world of wine. It's just, there's so much, it's so broad, and like there's so many places I know nothing about still, and yeah, it's just, you can always find something interesting to taste. I mean, there's so much in Italy, Spain, Portugal, and then all the classic regions too. There's just, it's just endless. And it's really about your mood and what you're eating and what wine you want to have, and
so true.
And having a broad knowledge of those regions allows you just to kind of find that perfect wine you want to have, and so it's just fun. Do you find that sometimes, and I'm not saying this, I'm saying this from a perspective, like, I really value you, because like you're kind of a little bit of an unofficial ambassador for the BC region as a whole, but do you find that people put you on a bit of a pedestal and assume that kind of like everything about everything? I think, that's something kind of that goes along with the Master of Wine, is that people think you know everything. But I always teach in any class, like the first thing you learn about wine is how much there is to learn and how little you actually will ever know. And then I say, even doing the Master of Wine, like I still feel like I don't know anything, right? I know a lot, but I feel there's just so much more out there, right? And then every year it's a new fresh start, because the new vintages, trends change, wines don't stay the same, they evolve with customers and consumers, and you just jump on that journey and enjoy it. And like I always say, don't feel any pressure to try and know everything, because you never will, but just enjoy that learning process as you go, right? And I mean, you have to eat and drink every day, right? So why, if you can enjoy that and make that a fun part of your life, then it's not a chore anymore. It's every day is something great. What am I going to have for dinner tonight? What wine am I going to have with it? Right? It's awesome. So.
Some people have commented when they're visiting me here that there's like a big drinking culture, and I think that's the wrong term to apply. It's more of a lifestyle, and I think that's something in Canada we haven't really caught on to quite yet, as much as say other regions. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when I came to Canada, some things like sparkling wine, for instance, people would only have it on like Christmas, New Year's Eve, Valentine's Day, and their birthday. I'm like, well, what about the other 361 days of the year? And, you know, like in Australia and in Europe, it's like you start most meals with a glass of bubbly. Like that's just kind of part of that culture, right? And you're a apero kind of thing. And that, we're starting to get that here. But, you know, like wine, if you look at wine as kind of part of the table, not as drinking, right? It's like the European way is it's a food. It's not an alcoholic thing you drink to get drunk. And you just have wine. Like I can't remember, I haven't probably had a day where I haven't tasted or had a couple of glasses of wine in probably 10 years.
Yeah.
Like, because it's just part of food. I can't sit down and eat dinner without wine with it. It's just, it's part of it. Yeah. So, yeah. So I think there's a lot of people in the industry who do have that more European culture and background. And and so, it's interesting that, I guess I just hang out with people that all drink like that. So
how do you keep your palate sharp? Like for people that are just starting to dig into this, like you're teaching the WSET courses and a lot of people are jumping on that bandwagon. How do you keep your palate and your nose sharp? Because I'm reading Cork Dork right now. I don't know if you've read it.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Fantastic book. And she talks a lot about how our olfactories are the most unevolved senses of all. Like, so how do you kind of go around and smell different things, or are you kind of beyond that at that point?
Yeah, I think you just, like when you're first getting into wine, if you try and taste like 20 wines, you'll be wiped. Like you reach a point where you can't smell or taste anymore. You're kind of wiped. But it's like, you know, it sounds sort of strange, but you're kind of like a wine athlete in a way. And the more you taste, like now I can judge, and when you're judging, you're often doing 100 wines a day, and I feel like I'm as sharp on the last wine as the first, right? But that's taken a lot of years of trying a lot of wines and not smelling too hard, not overdoing it, right? And you just kind of get used to that, and you can still function. But yeah, I mean, writing about wine's a bit funny because you're always trying to come up with interesting descriptors, but it can also be a bit of bullshit too, right? To try and come up with new terms. And so like I'm not out there searching for new smells and aromas and things like that. I focus more on what's the structure of the wine, the balance, that, the quality, that textural element, those kind of things, which to me that's what makes quality wine, not if it smells like strawberries or raspberries or peaches or whatever, right? That's kind of, who cares, in a way. That's good to describe a bit, but what you're really tasting is a wine's sweetness and acidity and body and texture and tannins and all those kind of things. And so you focus more on that in wine, and then the descriptors, they're kind of easy enough to come up with, I think.
So do you have a particular style that you're really into right now, or do you try to keep a wide cross section of wines to kind of stay up to date?
I don't know. I think for a lot of people, as your wine career or wine drinking evolves, it's like you just want wines that are more and more kind of real and less fucked with. Is probably the technical term. So when people are adding sugar back to wine, it just throws the balance of tannins and things off, and there's so much manipulation in wine these days that to me and to a lot of people, those wines just taste disjointed. They might technically have all the bits, but wine is always more than the sum of its parts, right? It's like, it's the overall feeling, not, does it have this intensity and this, and this whatever flavor. And it's like, you can have all those and create those in a winery, but it doesn't make a good wine at the end, right? It's got to be this sort of togetherness, and you just know when you put a good wine in your mouth that it's seamless and elegant, like the flavors all go together, and there's no edgy bits, and it's just like, you just know, even from a master of wine to a rookie, they can taste a good wine and know it's good. It
has that soul. But
I think that's sort of the less manipulated wines for me, I just naturally find taste better. And it doesn't have to be a full-on crazy natural wine, but just less manipulated. And I think that's winning, because you're starting to see big wineries are now starting to do things like wild ferment and unfined, unfiltered, and they're doing less, right? And it used to be they did more and more and more to try and make a specific type of wine. Now they're kind of, it's what you learn eventually is you can't change the grapes And as good as the grapes are, that's the limit of how good your wine is going to be. And you can make it a seamless, nice expression of those grapes, or you can try and add and subtract and craft it into something it never was intended to be, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so a lot of people still do that, but the better wines and the better wineries are figuring out how to just, okay, make the grapes as good as you can, and then that's going to dictate your wine and the style.
I'm really glad that you brought that up, because it's like the hot topic du jour is natural wines. And I'm so happy that you said that, especially being such an advocate, and the platform that you're speaking from, it's just dishonest. And that's the part that really bothers me. It's like we seek out organic and locally farmed food, but why don't we do the same with our wine? So
yeah, and like wine right now, you don't really have to put anything on a label, right? So you can add and do all this stuff to it and not tell the consumer anything. Whereas in other foods, you can't do that. And I would not be surprised if in, the next, say, decade, things like, ingredient labeling and stuff on the labels, it's already in some countries have to put some ingredients on there, and I bet in the next kind of 10 years that'll become more common. Like, how many calories are in a glass of wine? I want to know if they've added sugar back to a wine, right? Like, these like trend of these sweet red wines like Apothic and stuff like that. To me they taste super unbalanced wines, but people love them because they just love sugar, but they don't know they're buying. No one's telling them they're buying a sweeter wine, right? They're being tricked essentially, and I think that if you told the consumers that they're buying a sweeter wine that's been juiced up to just make them like it on that first taste and not think about the rest, then I don't think they'd be that happy personally. But so if you had to put that on the label, like how many sugar calories are in this and things like that, and what they've added, and people would probably want more and more of those organic, natural, just less manipulated wines. I think that that's a food, we're already there, right? We're already people reading every label for ingredients and know what they do and don't want. And wine, we just kind of, I think the perception amongst the consumer is that all wines are natural. They don't know how much is going on in the cellar sometimes, right? And so I think
they have a very romantic vision of
but the wineries work very hard to maintain that vision, right? And it's easy for them to do, and they unless you become a super wine geek, you don't really look into that more detail of what's done to a wine, how it's made. You just kind of assume it's grapes grown, crush it, ferment it, and you got wine, right? It's pretty simple, but there's a lot of steps in between, as we know.
Well, I was at a Christmas party on Friday, and a magnum of baby duck emerged.
Oh, nice.
And I was like, hey, I'll have a glass just to, humor my host.
Yeah, you got it.
And it was, fruit concentrate, lots of, dye, and I couldn't drink it because it was just, but I like that you mentioned Apothic, because a lot of people were asking me about, like, hey, well, what wines would you recommend for an amateur or rookie to start out with? And Jamie Good wrote a really good article about Apothic, and he likened it to being kind of like a bridge and like crossing over into
it's a gateway
styles.
wine, right? And you can probably all look at our wine evolution or friends and family, and people start often on white wines, often a bit sweeter white wines, and they go to drier, and then often progress to lighter reds, and then often to more heavier tannic reds and bigger wines and things like that, and then kind of some often then pull back to more sort of elegant, savory, complex wines, right? It's not everyone follows the same path, but it's very, very common, right? So things like that, if you're getting someone who was drinking rum and Coke and now they're drinking wine, great, right? That's perfect. Same with like white Zinfandel and things like that. That's they're probably the closest thing to drinking soft drinks, right? And then if they're moving into wine through that, and then they eventually go to drier taste, then that's great for the wine business. And I completely agree. We don't have to get rid of these wines. It's just let people know what they're having, and I don't like the aspect that I feel like their wineries are tricking people with sugar into liking wine. If people are like, I love sugar in my wine, bring it on, then that's fine, right? But there's just this sort of little bit of a devious kind of thing, marketing one thing and doing another, that sometimes feels a little bit disingenuous.
Do you think that that'll ever change, or do you think there's always going to be a place for those styles?
I think there's always a place for those styles of wine, because there's all different consumers, like you said, right? And so and people learn, their tastes change, they evolve, as we said, and so I think it's fine. They don't have to not exist, but it's when you try and basically have your cake and eat it too, right? You can't market yourself as a premium, you know, high-end terroir-driven wine, and then be just banging in some sugar to try and appeal to a mass range of consumers. Those things don't go together, right? And you that's where it gets sort of, if it's the entry level stuff, you know, that brings people in, great. But when it's being done in these like super high-end expensive wines, that, you know, that is a problem, I think. Yeah, you can't be everything to everyone, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So on the whole natural wine train and minimal intervention style, tell me about Little Farm, because that's exactly what that wine is, right? Yeah,
so Little Farm is was kind of always wanting to be, you know, I guess starting Little Farm was, you know, I kind of knew every reason why I shouldn't from my education stuff, because, you know, starting a wine business, unless you have lots of money, is not good. You just like cash flow like this, right? But I have my other Wine Plus business, which, you know, kind of could keep us going through that. And then, and so, Little Farm, we wanted to plant a vineyard from scratch. Found an awesome little property there with really off the charts levels of calcium carbonate in the soil, which, you know, it sounds very technical, but it gives the wines a real sort of mineral taste.
Okay.
Planted Chardonnay and Riesling because they really showcase that the best, and then wanted to make wines that would just show that piece of land, right, with you know, messing it up as little as possible. And, you know, it's very, very low tech. You know, we don't even own a destemmer crusher or anything, right?
It was all by hand.
All by hand, yeah. The grapes are hand harvested and they're foot trodden in bins and then bucketed into a tiny little basket press. Most of it's fermented in old barrels, like a lot of barrels, because we love that breathing you get through it, but we don't want the new oak flavor generally, so it's all older barrels, and then just wines that sort of are more savory and mineral and fresh and crisp, and you know, and as with first vintage was 2011, and you know, then we'd filter and add yeast at the start, and just slowly getting more and more kind of, you know, as you get more confident and don't need to, more and more natural, I guess. So now pretty much all the wines are wild ferments. Nearly all of them are unfined, unfiltered, you know. Well, they're all unfined, nearly all unfiltered as well. Couple of wines like the rosé will often filter, and and just like that's all that happens.
Are you trying to move towards like? Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, like, do you endeavor to not use sulfur at a certain
Not really,
point,
because for me it's like, you know, if you don't use sulfur, the wines mostly will oxidize, and you know, but the amount of, you know, again, not to get too technical, but the pH of the wine is so important to the sulfur. So the Rieslings that we make off that site, we add about 10 parts per million sulfur total just before bottling, and that's it. So it's almost nothing. It's almost nothing, but it just allows it to get through that bottling kind of, and you know, it doesn't, those wines last. So far they've lasted really well with very low sulfur, but yeah, it's all about, it's about the grapes, right? Those grapes can be ripe, but with high acidity, and that's a natural preservative. And if you have a natural preservative, any little bit of sulfur you add, that sulfur is way more effective, right? If you have a wine that's lower acid or got sweetness, you have to add a ton of sulfur to make that wine stable, right? So these wines are naturally very stable. We do a lot of aging on the lees in old barrels, and lees make wine more naturally stable as well. The aging in old barrels makes them naturally more stable. So then you just need tiny amounts of sulfur. Maybe you could get away with no sulfur in the Riesling, I don't know, but I'm not like adamant about, you know, I don't mind a little bit of it, so it is something that does naturally occur a little bit anyway in wine, so
cool.
But
well, I love your wines. I remember, I don't know if you remember this, but I saw you this was like 2 years ago at the Black Hills End of Harvest party, and I came up to you and I was like fangirling over your orange wine. I'm like, it's so good.
Yeah, the orange wine's super fun, and done
it's like
2
chunky.
vintages. Yeah, it's
so
like
cool.
And that was, you know, again, a wine sort of we interested in trying to make, and did a lot of research, and the first one we did we were super happy with. It's just so intense and such interesting flavors, and such a savory wine that goes with so many foods. And so the next year, 2017, we made more of it, and then again more 2018 this year too, because it's just been really successful.
So where do we find your wines?
There's on the website you can buy, so littlefarmwinery.ca. Can buy online. I think it's just $15 shipping for like 6 to 12 bottles anywhere in BC, so pretty reasonable. And then there's also a list on the website of where to buy the wines, and so there's a number of retailers in Vancouver, Victoria, up in the Okanagan here. Yeah, Jackson, Cherry Lane, in Penticton. Cask and Barrel has some Metro Liquor in Kelowna.
Oh, awesome.
Vessel Liquor in Victoria has a big selection. And then places like Kit's Wine Cellar in Vancouver, Liberty stores. A few of the wines are in the VQA stores and the Safe on Food stores. Yeah, just a couple of them we've put in VQA.
Okay, so you're all over the place despite having this relatively small production.
Yeah, small production, but it's a little bit in our...
So, what you look for in terms of wine, not so much like the douchey tasting notes, but structure, texture, all of that stuff. So what would you say you look for in a wine that you would consider great? Like, what is a great wine to you? Is it just balance, or...
You come to this realization that, you know, you hear these famous towns or villages and vineyards and stuff in France and different places, and when you get the right grape in the right place, you can make great wine, but you can't do it otherwise. There's a lot of sites, vineyard sites, that make good wine, and but you'll never make great wine. It doesn't matter what grape you put there. It's just something, right? About like, you know, something like Meursault, for example, little village in Burgundy, Chardonnay, and it's just like the texture you get and the freshness still and the elegance and the balance and the seamlessness of the oak they use and everything that goes together in that wine. It's just always delicious, right? And Chablis, another great Chardonnay, the opposite, those steely, racy mineral, but it just feels right? It all comes together. There's nothing that feels a bit out of place, or nothing feels like a square peg stuffed into a round hole, you know? And so it's when you put a wine like that in your mouth, you just know, right? Because it's just that seamlessness and elegance and texture and balance and all those things. And yeah, that's when you get a great wine, you know, and it does end up being the famous places around the world. I'm not saying that the New World can't do that, because we're actually discovering we can in a lot of places, you know, and you get some fantastic wine out of Australia, out of New Zealand, out of Chile, out of, you know, and high altitude vineyards in Argentina, and, you know, the little coastal parts of, you know, South Africa and the wards on the coast there. Beautiful, amazing wines that just, you know, they've nailed it right here too. I think in BC we're starting to do it, particularly Syrah just kills it here. Chardonnay and Riesling, that's why I planted those grapes, because I think they're some of the best, and on those calcium soils are great. You know, those are the standouts, I think. And yeah, you know, it's just about finding that right grape on the right place and making it in the right style too. You can't push it, you got to find what, you know, and as we kind of mature here in BC, we're doing that more and more, and the wines are just better and better and better, as long as the winemakers don't try and, you know, push it in a direction the grapes don't naturally want to go, right? So yeah, it's
a good time to be here because it's just exploding right now. So
yeah, it's still being discovered, but I love all this development of the sub GIs and stuff like that, because that's going to allow us to go, okay, here's a small area, what are the best grapes here? Hopefully those grapes will sell for more money, the wines will sell for more money, they'll pull out the other grapes of that region that aren't as good and plant more of those, and we'll start to get this nice patchwork quilt of right grape in these right little sub GIs and making better wine. But I mean, this might take 30, 40, 50 years, but you've got to start somewhere, right? You have to draw that line in the sand of the region and say, this is a similar soil type or climate and all those things. Let's go from here. Play around, make the best wine, and then those ones that are the best will start to you know, materialize and come out, and then hopefully we'll focus on those, and that's when we have a story to tell. Because, you know, right now we bring people in from international media and things, and they come and you're like, well, what do you do best in BC and the Okanagan? You're like,
we're still figuring it out.
Yeah, we kind of do everything, and some of it's good, and so we don't really have a link to place and grape yet at all, right? And so we need some smaller regions so we can start to tell that story, and it'll take time, but it has to come naturally. You can't force it, right?
I was talking to a winemaker friend of mine, and he expressed a little bit of concern with respect to the whole GI and sub-GI thing, and going in the direction of like the whole appellation system and being restricted to certain regulations and rules and winemaking. restrictions and all that kind of stuff? Do you
Yeah,
think
it's not
they would
in
ever go in that
no, it's
direction?
not in the laws here, and like nearly all New World countries, that's all they do is define a boundary of a region, and that's essentially it, right? In Europe, you know, they control what oak you can use and how long, and winemaking and pruning style even, and some that has not really existed in any New World region to any extent, and
and you don't think that it would ever go that?
No one's interested in that.
Okay.
Right? Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think that's a worry. So,
okay, cool. Are there any wines that have ever elicited like an emotional response for you that like literally had
good or bad, or
yeah, either or, yeah, maybe good.
Yeah, I've had definitely, wine can be emotional, particularly when you know what a wine can be, and then it's not, and usually it's because someone has intervened and done something to that wine that they shouldn't have, like adding sugar to high-end Napa Cabernet or something like that, or making it sort of sweet to try, and they're still charging $100-$200 a bottle and things like that, or so much in the oak and Argon here, it's so often we just take beautiful fruit and then kill it with too much oak, right?
Yeah.
And why, I don't understand. It just makes the wine more expensive, not as high quality, and it just overpowers and ruins the wine, and so things like that, I get very angry. Yeah, probably unnecessarily angry, but I care about it so much, and it's frustrating when you see amazing grapes that have been kind of ruined by a heavy hand, and yeah, that can be pretty frustrating. And then sometimes it's the opposite, like just an amazing, wow, this wine is just killing it, and it's often, like the best Pinot Noirs you'll ever have from Burgundy or Chardonnays, or I love Blanc de Blanc Champagne, to me it just, that hits it out of the park nearly every time, those styles, and or you get an older wine that's just so complex, and it does elicit a lot of emotional responses. Sometimes judging can be a little worse. It's just like, get this out of my mouth as fast as possible kind of responses. Those aren't quite as fun.
Or not being able to linger if you find something that really, sings to you.
Yeah, and there's just wines that are just that little bit off being great, all the time. It's frustrating because you're so close. You want them to get there for whatever reason that might be. And,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and perception plays a big role too, right? If we're spending a lot of money on it, or if we're in a certain environment, or we're with certain people, that can play a huge role as well, right?
That's why the blind tasting that we do in most of the judging competitions is great, because you just, it's you have no idea, and you keep an open mind, and it's sometimes surprising what you find. And I love being surprised by either wines I haven't liked in the past that I now like, and they've evolved and gotten better. That's the best, right? Or wines you hadn't heard of that you now get to try, and things like that. So
well, I just wanted to finish off with maybe some producers that you're really coveting right now, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in the Okanagan.
Okay, yeah. Oh, what have I liked lately? There's some great Pusey Vale Riesling from Australia, from the Eden Valley. The Contours Chardonnay, Contours Riesling, and they're regular on. They're in the private stores right now. Pretty amazing wine. There's just, I don't know, there's so many locally. Places like Bartier Brothers. Love the elegance of the wines there. Le Vieux Pan, particularly their Cuvée Violette Syrah, if you can find it, is amazing. I don't know, there's a lot of great stuff out there. Tantalus, I'm liking everything they're doing up there right now. There's so many. So Orofino in the Similkameen is great.
That's true.
Yeah, love all
Have you
that.
had a chance to try a lot of these like smaller, more garagiste natural guys, like Sunday in August?
Not too many of them. No, not too many of them.
Okay.
Be curious to for sure. Yeah.
It's tasty stuff.
Yeah, no, and those are the kind of those are great little stories, because they're getting to, push that boundary in that style. When you're making small amounts of wine like Little Farm, you can afford to make more interesting wines, right? If you're trying to sell 5,000 cases, 10,000 cases or something, you got to go pretty mainstream, because that's most of the clientele, right? Totally. So it's these smaller guys that can actually afford to do that, right? And and hopefully they can get hands on their own vineyard land too, because it's, if farming the grapes, like a Little Farm anyway, for us, farming the grapes is most of the winemaking.
Absolutely.
It's like 90% of it, and so to get access to that good fruit, and there is a shortage of grapes out there, right? So we need to get the good grapes into the hands of some interesting things like that to really see what we can do as a region.
For
so
sure.
yeah, so I think that's great. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, well, I think that's all the questions I have for you.
Cool. Well, thanks for
I could
having
keep
me.
asking you questions, but yeah. So again, Rhys Pender, and if you want to enroll for WSET, you could try and get him as an instructor. Hopefully.
Yeah. Wineplus.ca. I teach all the Penticton and Kelowna classes,
awesome.
And then I have teachers in Victoria and Vancouver, and
cool.
Edmonton. We're in Edmonton.
Oh,
now
great.
as well, so,
Awesome.
yeah.
So wealth of information, clearly. So thank you so much for being here with me. And again, Laura here with Silk & Coupe. Thank you for watching.